I'm farming about 15 odd k's east of Jamestown, Canary Belt, and we're predominantly cropping, but run roughly 1,000 ewes and grow crossbred lambs. I was lucky enough to have a set of sheep yards that were probably 150 years old from back in the Yongla Station day, and had been built on over those years. So we had a wooden draft set up, like I said, 150 odd years old, plus cattle yards and plus some more modernised sheep holding yards altogether, which made our so-called sheep yards. So it was all a bit of a disaster, really. Dog's breakfast. So about 15 odd years ago, we spat the dummy, and at that time, the only company that would come on the place and customise a design for us was Atlex. So we got Atlex to come along and design a set of yards that it still incorporated our cattle yards, still maintained the more modern sheep holding pens that we had, but completely redesigned the draft and the handling race and the main working area of it. So then from there, that certainly made sheep handling one hell of a lot better, a lot more enjoyable job. One day, myself and one of my lads who was at school at the time, one hot October day, had to inject quite a few crossy lambs, and we both just about died and spat the dummy on vaccinating lambs in this double handling race. And I thought, well, there's got to be a better way, and I figured the best thing with sheep really would be if they didn't have legs. Because while they got legs, they're just a mongrel thing to handle in a yard or in a handling machine, or you know, to do anything to them, because their legs are what creates all the problems. So around that same time, I see one company, ProWay, had come up with a bulk handling machine for handling numbers of sheep at one time, and it lifted them off the ground so their legs were in midair. And once they were in this with their legs swinging in the air, well, they were just submissive and they just didn't want to fight. And it was a piece of cake then to handle them. So Ian, I thought, was going to try and find...
Found one, but I'm having trouble getting it to play.
Okay. Well, anyway, this bulk handler we bought, well, there was a ProWay and there was another one made up in the Riverland as well. Similar, it was the same concept, but a bit different idea. But the ProWay worked for us in that we could fit it into our double handling race, basically cut apart one of the races, so we still had a second race if we wanted to. We had a three-way draft in front of it, and then a two-way draft on the outlet end of the handler. So if you were mouthing or you marked sheep and you wanted to take them off, you could. The other unit that was around at the time, you could only work on one side of it. You couldn't have operators on both sides. But it had an advantage in that it was solar powered, worked off a car battery, and they both worked hydraulically. Hydraulics lift the sheep up. But just for us, the ProWay fitted in. And now there's another design in Western Australia. There's a similar sort of thing. They hold roughly, I don't know, 15 to 20, 25 sheep, just depending on their size, obviously, and the wool, etc. on them. And the other bit of gear that we bought along the way was a Atlex three-way auto drafter, which we bought second hand. It was an earlier design of these auto drafters, had sensors in it with a squeeze function, air operated, and been using that for weighing our prime lambs. Feedlots right next to the yard, so yeah, quite handy for that job, as well as bungholing. It's got a function to clamp them. You can remote control stop the weighing process, and then you can lift them a bit and access and give them a bunghole, and then you can go on with your process of weighing. So
that's just a photo of it.
Okay, yeah. So they make them in sort of modules. That's the same size that we bought, and you can add another one onto the front of it if you want more capacity. And it's a bit hard to see inside it, but there's sort of a false race inside with slats across the bottom, and and you get the sheep in there, and then the hydraulics just lift them off the ground. And as soon as their legs are in free air, they just sit there. They're as dopey as. And it just happened that soon after we put it in, I had a fairly decent motorbike accident while we were shearing, and my left shoulder and arm was pretty well buggered. But I could still mouth sheep and backline them and so on in that unit because they just weren't fighting anymore. So we use it for, ear tagging, drenching, vaccinating, backlining, mouthing. That's probably about it, I guess. Yeah. They make a portable one as well if you want to cart it around with wheels and set it up out in the paddock. But it just takes the fight right out of sheep, and ends up making, vaccinating crossy lambs quite an enjoyable job. You can just go along and just go bang, 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 like that, instead of having to grab them, and they don't tunnel in underneath and they don't jump over the top of each other and all that sort of thing. So, yeah. They walk into it, and on the floor is a whole heap of, they're steel rods with a piece of poly pipe over them, with a gap of about 4 or 5 inches, and they're attached to cables each end, which go up through a pulley system to one long ram, and then you activate the ram and it pulls all the cables up and just lifts the inner. When you finish, you lower it down and the sheep run out the front. So you do them in batches like that. Yeah, that's right. As you let them down, especially ewes tend to get a bit lazy and think, well, this is nice sitting here. So you tend to put it down so that a few get the idea that they've got to get going, and they'll get going, and you just have it so they can sort of touch the ground, and then as they're going out, you just let it down that little bit more.
And that's on a foot rail, is it?
Foot. Oh, it's an overhead. That's the release bar, so it's all overhead. You just sort of pull on a rope, I suppose, to make it go up and down, and then you can remote open the front door from the back and close it again. And then there's 2 flying foxes on it to hold your drench gear or whatever, and you can have operators each side.
Yeah, have operators each side, Craig, or can you reach
No.
across it?
Yeah, you can reach across. Yeah. It's just a bit wider than a normal handling race. It'd probably be the width of this table, I guess, sort of 2 sheep side by side, I guess, depending on their size. But yeah, you can all work from, or both work from one side or whatever, or if you're left-hander, right-hander, or if you're getting in each other's way, one can be on the other side, whatever.
Yeah, because they're immobilised, you can reach.
Yeah, yeah. They just don't fight. They just sit there. It's amazing how once sheep got their legs off the ground, that's it. They just give up.